jumping from the Dornier 228. As I say, getting out there at around 4,000 feet. You can see 9 canopies. The smoke trailing from their legs, created by smoke canisters which are attached to their boots. They activated them at the last moment before jumping out of the aircraft. That was why you could see the Dornier looking as though it was generating its own smoke trail. And we're going to see a new style Falcons display for the 2022 season. And this is what they call the crisscross for obvious reasons. All 9 jumpers crossing over in the sky, and they will then be forming into their carousel. This is the team's favourite manoeuvre. All of this requiring vast amounts of concentration and trust in one another, which has been built up over the course. The team has a very long history, dating back to 1961, when number 1 parachute training school based at RAF Abingdon formed a team called the Big Six, displaying at local events around the south of England, generally jumping from RAF Armstrong Whitworth Argosy transport aircraft. Their first public appearance as the official RAF parachute display team was at the Farnborough Air Show of 1965. It was then that the name of the Falcons was officially adopted. Eight of the team members, as you can see, continuing the carousel. We also see that one member of the team is acting as the flag jumper for today's display. The team now transitioning into snake formation for their approach to land. And as they descend towards the DZ, the order of landing today: Falcon 1, Flight Sergeant James Bruce; Falcon 2, Sergeant Gary Nicholson; Falcon 3, Sergeant Ben Samot, is driving a 115 horsepower Rotax 914 engine. Pushes the Autogyro through the air, providing the motive power for forward flight. But those rotor blades are completely freewheeling. The air goes up through the rotor disc and turns them without any form of mechanical drive. It's a principle called auto-rotation. Once the Autogyro is airborne, the rotors simply look after themselves and keep on spinning. You'll notice that the rotor is inclined slightly towards the rear. The air flows up through the rotor disc, keeping them spinning. And one of the beauties of this is that if the engine were to stop, the consequence would simply be that the Autogyro would gradually, slowly and controllably descend, with the rotor continuing to turn thanks to the airflow. And compared to the helicopter, there are far fewer moving parts. It's much simpler and cheaper for a private owner to maintain and operate, and there's that additional safety factor. Plus it's very versatile, it can operate into a very small field. The landing roll, as we'll see demonstrated later, can be as short as just 3 meters. See here again with the museum, because in the Battle of Britain hangar is an example of the Aerobatics C-30A, built under license by Avro as the Avro rotor, and used in wartime, not least from Duxford, for Royal Air Force duties, including particularly the calibration of the pioneering chain-to-home air-defense radar network during the Battle of Britain and afterwards. But the Fiera Autogyros like that one, very much bigger, bulkier machines. The caliber's absolutely at the fun end of the market. He's very grateful to his sponsors who support his display activities around the UK. There's Airbox, which makes the runway HD navigation software, also cruising flight equipment and those pilot headsets. Of course, the craft can't ride the cars. Very, very good. There they are, on the roll as a pair. That's the axis at 90 degrees onto the main runway, the main runway providing A-axis for the displays, doing so at 120 knots, not below 100 feet. And we'll see the run-in, there it goes, transitioning into a climb, and that will be followed straight away by a nose-over with a rotation through 90 degrees on the way down. Transitioning on to the main A-axis, and about to pull up into a 180 degree wing over. Coming back down the line, we'll see a 360 degree wing over around the display centre point. To reverse direction, another 180 degree wing over at the western end. Flying the aircraft today is Lieutenant Jim Carver, the Black Hats pilot for the 2022 season. He actually joined the Royal Navy as an aircraft engineering technician and maintained Navy Seeking helicopters for a few years. But then he was selected for officer training as a pilot in 2008, qualified as a search and rescue pilot on the Seeking in 2014. Later flew the airborne search and control version of the Seeking Mark 7, deploying to the Middle East. When it was retired in 2017, he converted to the Wildcat HMA-2, doing so on a 2-5 squadron provided for this aircraft, which is the training unit for all pilots and observers testing for the Wildcat Maritime Force. Pirouetting the airbound below display boundaries and performing counter-narcotics missions, counter-illicit trafficking missions with the US Coast Guard. He then returned home to 825 and is one of the qualified helicopter instructors teaching the next generation of pilots on this maritime attack helicopter, which may look quite familiar, it may look like a Western Lynx, like which we've seen many times before at Duxford. The systems on board far more advanced. In 2021, the TALES, the laser guided rocket system, entered service on this machine. Now the great element of the future service ground program with the Wildcat operationally, the heavy part, the PBY season and radar guided anti-shipping missile, is to follow. making a vertical climb at display data. And we'll see here the nose over with 135-degree turn incorporated into it this time. Heading out to the east, 180-degree wing over to head back in the other direction once again. And then a 270-degree wing over. Successful on the world market, not just as a trainer, but also with some now for the two strike masters. With the self-command aircraft, the strike masters replace the S-mentioned personal provost, and what a step up in capability. There's the second, and heading back in towards us for the third. For these events, and you can search for the event How to Be a Fighter Pilot on the IWM's What's On page. That date again for your diary, Saturday the 9th of July. What's going on here at the moment is the Great Warbird team prepare for their display. Also taxiing out at the moment. The wonderful Aero 504K. the full-size representations of their respective aircraft. All of the SE-5s appears to have been knocked out by the enemy. Even on its takeoff roll, though the problem seems to have dissipated, and of course a smoke generation system. Then we've got the representation of the UCAS CL-1, first of the enemy aircraft, and fairly leaping into the air, the first of the two Fokker DR-1s, the Dreideckers, the triplanes. This is, of course, the Aero 504, and its maiden flight in 1913. It was the start of an incredible success story. Nearly 9,000 504s had been produced by the end of the war. Naval Air Service famously bombed the German Zeppelin airship factories in Friedrichshafen, what has been categorized as one of the first strategic raids in history. See the other end. So we've got one SE-5A with the CL-1 trying to chase it, and it's escorting Dreidecker near its wing. The other SE-5, which is still smoking on and off, receiving the attentions of the other Fokker triplane. 21 British or Empire squadrons used SE-5As during the war, as well as 2 American units of the US Army Air Service. Many of the most famous Allied aces, people like Albert Ball, McMahon, James McCutcheon and Billy Bishop flew SE-5As. More than 5,000 of them were built. And they were a good performer at all altitudes. They were faster than their German rivals, they had a very good rate of climb, they were strong and agile. These, as I say, 7/8 scale replicas. One of which is hitting a very bad time from one of our 2 Fokker DR-1s. The Fokker triplane is certainly the most famous German aircraft because it is always automatic of its Sopwith triplane had proved so successful on the Allied side. We used to see a Sopwith triplane as part of the Great War display team. It recently been sold by its private owner. The issue with the triplane was its airframe. Very agile in turns, but it was just 20 minutes. Their training on these aircraft were challenging to handle, largely due to their entry in spite of the Central Flying School having been established not long before the war. And it was thrust into an incredibly intense form of aerial combat. Here we've got 6 aircraft airborne, but there would have been dozens taking part in the big dogfights of the First World War. They were flying without oxygen and also flying without parachutes.
Yes, that's right. There was the powers that be felt that the ferocity of the battles that were likely to be taking place would not be matched by the ferocity of the pilots, and that if they had parachutes, they would take to the silt rather than actually go into battle. The other thing, of course, is that once you get above about 10,000 feet, you start to suffer oxygen starvation. And these airplanes, they did not, as you said, have oxygen, and they would be in battle sometimes as high as 20,000 feet.
Yeah, absolutely right. Big fear of pilots was being caught up in a fire, and they had caught a fire in these aircraft because they would have caught fire very easily. Display a few years back, and it depicts a Dreidecker of Jasta or Jagdstaffel Fighter Squadron 6 that was flown by Lieutenant Johann Janssen, who scored 13 kills during the First World War. The other one of Peter Bond, who was also flying it, depicts a triplane that was flown by Lieutenant Lutz Beckmann. Consolidated PBY 5A Catalina.
As you say, a very distinctive shape. Once you see this, you know exactly what it is from miles away. The big barn door of a wing, giving it tremendous lift. And interestingly, this particular aircraft carries American insignia, but its operational service in the military was with the Canadians, I believe. That's back in 1943.
Yes, it was. In fact, this aircraft was built by the Canadian Vickers Company, and so strictly speaking, we should call it a Cancer rather than a Catalina. But you're mentioning that huge wing. This was an integral part of the design, and why it was such a slippery and advanced design aerodynamically. Because it's a so-called wet wing, which means it incorporates some of the fuel tankage, which meant you didn't have to have tanks positioned elsewhere in the airframe to give it long range. It led to a major weight saving, which further improved the range. Also very clean lined aerodynamically, so low drag, again adding further to that range.
It does look rather cumbersome, though, doesn't it? And if you listen to the pilots, one of them has said when it comes to handling, you can move the control wheel, go and have a cup of tea, and eventually the aircraft will start to move.
Yes.
So it's not, so it's very agile in the air.
But, as we can see here, good rate of turn.
Yes.
Distance record in excess of 3,400 miles on its maiden flight in May 1936. And there we can see the floats now.
These aircraft are most commonly associated with two particular roles. I suppose one is the air sea rescue services that they provided, although that was somewhat later in the war. But the primary role, which we should remember, their success was in the anti-submarine role. When the Wolfpack groups of submarines were attacking the Allied shipping as the supplies were coming across the Atlantic, there was a real danger that Britain would actually be starved out of the war. And until we got to grips with that particular method of attacking us, the future was very bleak indeed.
Yes, they served PBYs, Catalinas. They were known in all theatres of World War II. They were one of the assets, the very long-range assets that helped fill that mid-Atlantic gap that was the area where U-boats accompanied by Focke-Wulf FW-200 Condor maritime aircraft had previously been able to roam almost at will. Set up such a service fairly rudimentarily with submarine walruses and other aircraft. Then finally in 1945 the 5th Emergency Rescue Squadron of the US Army Air Forces formed up with OA-10A Catalinas. They Delta and all sorts of other aircraft, including P-47s and so forth, counting the cost. Interesting operation plain sailing is made up of shareholders, some of whom, but not all, are pilots of varying experience, varying past flying jobs, some of them entirely private pilots, others with a great amount of military experience. They've also got non-pilot shareholders, which are going to be performing as our next display item. Having previously flown in that configuration a few seasons ago, putting the smoke on and running in from the west. This is Team Raven coming in Delta formation, and they'll be pulling up into the Delta loop. In Delta formation and turning away to the right. They'll be coming back in Delta to give us a view of the undersides of the 6 RB8s, which have been repainted since their appearance here last year. Very smart new livery looks too, and on the nose you might be able to make out the logo of their sponsor, MT Propeller. On the 45-degree line, the smoke goes off, and we see 2 of the aircraft pulling away from the main formation. Those are Ravens 4 and 5, in gun numbers 1, 2, 3, and 6 in box formation. Leading the team for 2022, Raven. Calling the pull up. That's 4 and 5 making driver side, 1, 2 and 3 out onto the axis, but there's split number 6 goes vertical for a stall turn. Numbers 4 and 5 again who are in front of us, while Navy flying first Seeking helicopters and then Sea Harriers. He flew 67 combat missions in Sea Harriers. In the Falcons, he displayed the Sea Harrier CG pulling up. Rolling left in this big Delta formation. Ready for the Delta downward bomb burst. That was the 2022 Team Raven. see the advances in jet fighter design and technology. It took to the air just 4 years later in 1940s, two-seat trainer, and they notched up many firsts. Was, of course, a vampire in the hands of that great naval test pilot, Captain Eric Winkle Brown, that became the first jet in history to land on and take off from an aircraft carrier, namely HMS Ocean. Centenary celebrations in 2018, they put them back into Norwegian markings. And now, this RAF scheme has been reapplied. This aircraft came over to Britain in April for the making of adaptation of the Frederick Forsyth novella, The Shepherd. Filming was carried out over East Anglia, especially over North Norfolk. If you don't know it, the book tells the story of a vampire FB-5 pilot from number 94 Squadron, part of the 2nd Tactical Air Force at Celle in what was then West Germany. He was flying home for leave on Christmas Eve in 1957 when fog closed in over the North Sea. Eventually he was rescued by the crew of a de Havilland Mosquito, which guided him home. And so it was that, having been contracted for the filming, the historical squadron put the single-seat Vampire into exactly those colours of the number 94 Squadron aircraft that was in Ireland. Rolling down the Autogyro airport. Met up with a friend of his, Rolls-Royce pilot Ronnie Harker. Harker, Campbell, both agreed that Mustang's performance would be improved lighter with the installation of the Rolls-Royce Aerobatic engine. Just such a conversion was carried out by Rolls-Royce. Its performance was indeed improved. In And so it was that the red long-range Mustang escort freighter legend was born, along with aircraft such as this TF-51D. Example of the Harvard 4 from the Aircraft Restoration Company and the Harvard 2A from Anglian Warbirds. Outstanding train will, for a start, it's powerful enough to not be too easy for a trainee to fly. 600 horsepower from the Pratt & Whitney Wasp radial engine. And so a very good lead-in to the still more potent front-line types they go on to encounter. Some of its characteristics rather similar to the fighters of the era. It could certainly bite if a student wasn't careful. They could also be armed with guns, with practice bombs, with rockets and so forth for armament training purposes. One of its most notable uses for training was as part of the British Commonwealth Air Training Plan. British-based surface line training schools closed as Luftwaffe attacks posed ever more of a risk. So the decision was taken to relocate them further out of harm's way, particularly to Canada and Rhodesia, as was. In fact, in Canada alone, 167,000 aircrew, including more than 50,000 pilots, pass through their plants, facilities, and many of them train on Aerobatics. No fewer than 15,495 of these aircraft were built. And as I say, it wasn't just during wartime, but their service continued post-war in significant numbers, and they were used on the front line as well. The US Air Force employed them as forward air control platforms in the Korean War, helping guide strikes by United Nations forces. The RAF used them as light strike aircraft during the Malayan emergency of the 1950s against communist gangs. To be delivered to the RAF arrived on strength in 1938. It was during 1955 that the last RAF trainees to get their pilot's wings on the Harvard did so. But still a few Harvards remained on military charge for years on test support duties at the UK Flight Test Centre under its various guises at Boscombe Down in Wiltshire. Restoration company built in Canada by Canadian Car and Foundry. It's a Mark IV Harvard. It served with the Portuguese Air Force, that following a period with the West German Luftwaffe, and it's today in Portuguese colours. And the one behind, which is operated by Anglian Warbirds from Earl's Cone, has also been flying with classic wings here this weekend, is in US Navy colours. Served with both the South Africans and the Portuguese. last pass now, and for those of you who don't know, the very distinctive note of the carbon caused not directly by the engine, but it's a sound effect resulting from the propeller tips going supersonic. That was a very... When they go past, you'll be able to see the very unusual looking undercarriage arrangement on the main wheels. We'll talk more about that and the history of the really interesting little aeroplane when they come back to display shortly. Following them off is the Autogyro of Peter Troy Davies. Flown by one of the top exponents of display aerobatics on the circuit, and it starts to take off. This is video with the muscle backplane. Straight into a side slip and then climbing away, rolling as he does so. Just look at this aircraft's raw performance, based on a Pitts S2S special. 300 horsepower from the Lycoming AEIO 540 engine. But of course, an immensely high power to weight ratio, coupled with the changes made to the already very capable Pitts Special airframe, it's produced absolutely stunning display act. They're throwing in a couple of aileron rolls on the 45-degree downline as he travels from left to right. Pulling up into a half loop, and he's going to throw in a couple of, or 2.5 negative G tumbles at the apex. Finishing upright, and again on the 45-degree downline heading towards the display centre. Then pulling vertical, rolling in the vertical, and then 2 negative G snap rolls. There's Rich reaching his gate height. The height he was achieved successful completion of the manoeuvre, 1,200 or so feet at the apex. Back down now for another loop. This time we have a triple negative G snap or shoulder roll at the apex. When you see the aircraft in platform like that, you can see the very highly modified wing this aircraft has, just one of the changes that Rich has made to the design. Now a very uncomfortable negative G out side loop, pulling up into what he calls a micro loop, and then back down towards the display datum, pulling up to high alpha, a high angle of attack. And you can just see what I mean about the power to weight ratio. He's virtually able, well, not quite today because we haven't got quite so much wind, but he's able to fly extremely slowly. He's sometimes in a stronger wind, able to bring the aircraft almost to a hover. While the modifications to the airframe have made possible some of the extreme aerobatic manoeuvres that you see during this display, they also massively improved its handling characteristics at slow speeds like that. Diving in, building up speed, building up energy before pulling vertical. This for a spiral tower. It has absolutely penetrating vertical performance, this aircraft. One turn off, thanks bin, 2, 3. Just about 4, and then recovery. Silly to pull up aerobatics. Flying in aerobatic competitions before taking up display flying and gradually modifying his specials to this incredible degree down the line at very low altitude on the knife edge. De vleugels zijn van wit metaal. Intussen erin gekomen. Een ranke nachtdek, waarin instructeur en leerling naast elkaar in de cockpit kunnen zitten. Hierdoor is onder andere het uitzicht veel beter dan bij andere lestoestellen. De schroefbladen zijn verstelbaar met een 3000 meter stijgingsmogelijkheden. Na een zeer korte aanloop is de instructeur al los. Robert, welcome to Duxford.
Thank you, Ben. It's a pleasure to be here, and we just started our show at Duxford Formation. They make A360 over the right in box formation, and then later on they switch to the swan formation. The Falcon 4 formation is a foundation based in the Netherlands at the Autogyro. And we are a non-profit organization, and we exist this year for 40 years in August 2020. We keep the historic aviation in the Netherlands alive, and we do a lot of mission transformations, and we exist 15 pilots, 6 maintenance guys, and of course we have a board. At the moment they are in the right-hand 360. The lead is Dominique van Wijk. It's an ex-Air Force pilot. At the moment he is a retired KLM pilot. He also flew the LF5 and the F-27 Fairchild. He was even a demo pilot on the friendship, and he won the first prize at Fairport. The number 2, it's the plane at the right hand side. This was a Bronson. He was a previous pilot on the Apache, even a demo pilot as well on the Apaches. And he won 2 times a prize at Fairport. The number Charlie, that's the left-hand plane. He is still in the Air Force. He flew the F-16, and at the moment he is a PC-7 instructor and also did demos on that. At the moment they are switching to the so-called SWAT formation. The number 2, now behind the lead, it's the previous Delta, that's Stephen van Dijk. That is our barefoot pilot, but today he is flying with his shoes on. The day before he forgot his shoes, but he solved the problem. He also flew the F5 and F16, and he's also flying the Dutch Thunderbox and the solar display in the air. At the moment he has his own company, for upside recovery, calling home use, and that was the introduction of the S11 to the Dutch public. And the Dutch public was the plane made its first flight in 1947, which is a very good year because I was born that year. The plane was built in Amsterdam North, and
well, yes, indeed, and was one of the first products of Fokker after the war.
yeah, it was one of the, and they built it in Amsterdam North, and typically Dutch, there was in Amsterdam North is no airport, so they had to put them on the boats, and they transferred them by boats through the Amsterdam canals towards Schiphol, where they took off on 18 December 1947. And the funny thing is, a couple of years ago, we with Fokker 4, we did the same thing. Took off at the same day from that November 4 aircraft. So the Fokker has 11, a lot of aircraft have been built. They were flown in the Netherlands by the Air Force and the Navy. They were also built in formation. The lead up front will make a half loop, half roll. The delta, that's behind the lead, he will make a stall turn, and the other two pilots at the left and the right, they make a wave off and then proceed to kind of downwind when they come in. Now they're coming in for the tuned ring. Behind each other, next to each other. The lead is going down any moment, and the number 2 waits until it's at the same point. And then the gaggle loose. It's very beautiful. Gentlemen and boys and girls, this is the end of the display of Fokker 4.
Extras going off in pairs. They're going round to the north to Fulham because they're the only acts of the day that have permission for a crowd arrival.
This is the box loop. Andy is a founding member of the Blades. He's a bit of a dinosaur, but we love him. Andy has played in every position in the team. He's a former Red Arrow and Jaguar pilot. He's flown 3,000 hours in the Extra 300. Now as the blades pull up into the vertical, blades 2 and 3 perform opposite stall turns while blade falls a pushover and blade pulls back for falling angels. The team will now head directly towards the crowd right at full speed and in staggered formation for the first break and display, putting up to 8G for crossfire break. Cameras at the ready. They're now going to hold the aircraft pointed straight up until there's no forward speed, at which point you'll see them stop completely before gravity starts to win and flips them on their backs. Now as they descend back down, the aircraft to the right is blade 4, James McMillan, also known as McZ. James starts this career for the longest fast jet fire aircraft on backwards with the slide. Whilst it's looking very impressive, this is one of our least favourite requests. The aircraft is probably slow and adaptive on the original version. Blade 1 is now flying inverted at the front of the formation, while blades 2 and 3 work hard on the rudder to demonstrate an unnatural and follow the crowd line to the form of box bend. This is dedicated to our prime sponsor, Aerobatics, for the 7th year. This manoeuvre gives you the perfect view of the logo on the underside of their wings. Aerobatics specialises in delivering aviation safety software, providing solutions to over 200 airlines. Separated for a second. There's obviously a technical issue on one of the aircraft, but everything is all under control.
Fortress Sally B. Representing some of the very best of the air display scene. A remarkable aeroplane, the B-17, that began being deployed to Europe 80 years ago this year by the US Army Air Forces. The first bombing raid by the 8th Air Force took place in August 1942. B-17E models from the 97th Bomb Group at Grafton Underwood in Northamptonshire, escorted by RAF Spitfires, undertaking an attack on railway marshalling yards at Rouen. The idea had been that such a heavily armed bomber as the B-17 wouldn't need fighter escorts for the whole duration of their mission. That hope would sadly be proved wrong. Later models like this B-17G had an extra gun turret under the nose, so-called chin turret. The waist gun positions were moved so as to become more effective, and the engines were upgraded as well. It was the provision of better long-range escort fighters, the likes of the P-47 Thunderbolt and the P-51 Mustang we saw earlier, that helped increase the survivability of the Flying Fortresses. Dedicated to the members of the Sally B Supporters Club. I go to sallyb.org.uk. For the archival Signatures of donors emblazoned on the aircraft, and of course thank you NHS on the undersides. Here on day 2 of our Duxford Summer Air Show for 2022. It's been quite a weekend.